The invisible architecture of success. What we don't see builds what we do. Have you ever noticed how we celebrate the summit but rarely discuss the climb? We marvel at skyscrapers without acknowledging their foundations. We applaud the promotion but overlook the countless late nights that made it possible. I recently had the profound privilege of interviewing Elaina Royston, whose insights have fundamentally transformed how I understand success, particularly for Black women navigating professional spaces. Elaina isn't just a thought leader, she's a revolution in human form. Her work illuminates something both radical and deceptively simple. The unseen builds the seen. Through her tireless advocacy and brilliant analysis, she's helping rewrite the narratives that have constrained generations of talented professionals. Her ability to articulate the invisible forces shaping visible outcomes has quite literally changed thousands of lives. What struck me most about my conversation with Elena wasn't just her impressive credentials or accomplishments, though they are many. It was her unwavering commitment to shining light on what happens beneath the surface, those invisible forces that either propel us forward or hold us back. Most people, she told me, leaning forward with intensity, are looking at the wrong metrics entirely. I've been thinking about this for weeks now. We're obsessed with visible outcomes, the promotion, the award, the recognition, while completely overlooking the invisible architecture that makes those achievements possible or impossible. This invisible architecture isn't just about habits or discipline, though those matter. It's about the narratives we've internalized, the beliefs we've absorbed, the subtle ways we've been taught to limit ourselves before anyone else has the chance to. For Black women, especially, this invisible architecture is often built from contradictory blueprints. Be exceptional, but not threatening. Be confident, but not too much. Be grateful for the seat at the table, but don't ask to redesign the table itself. Take Shireen Hatcher, whose story Elena shared with me. Hatcher's journey exemplifies what happens when we recognize that liberation must happen on two fronts simultaneously, dismantling external barriers while also freeing ourselves from internalized limitations. After years in corporate America, Hatcher realized something profound. The most insidious obstacles weren't always the institutional ones. They were the quiet voices she'd internalized telling her to be smaller or to simply be grateful for inclusion without expecting actual influence. What changed everything wasn't just fighting for a seat at the table. It was recognizing that she'd been carrying invisible chains, beliefs about what she deserved, what was possible, what was appropriate to ask for. Her breakthrough came when she began intentionally examining these beliefs, questioning their origins, and systematically replacing them with truths that served her purpose rather than limiting it. The most revolutionary thing I did, Hatcher shared with Elena, wasn't confronting external discrimination. It was confronting the discrimination I had internalized against myself. This is what I mean by the unseen building the seen. Hatcher's visible success, transforming boardrooms, launching initiatives that changed career trajectories nationwide, began with invisible work that no one applauded, that didn't show up on any resume. But here's where it gets really interesting. When we start paying attention to this invisible architecture, we notice patterns everywhere. Consider what Elena learned from Casey Green's advocacy work. Green observes something crucial about representation versus actual power. Having Black leaders present in high profile roles looked good on diversity reports, but it meant little if those same leaders lacked true authority over strategy or resource allocation. The visible metric, representation, masked the invisible reality. Influence. Being in the room means nothing if your ideas are questioned more than praised. if your authority is undermined, if your presence is symbolic rather than substantive. Green's work focused on creating environments where diverse voices had decision making power, not just presence, to shape culture from within. The results were transformative. Organizations saw improved innovation outcomes. Marketing resonated more authentically with Black consumers. Funding began flowing towards solutions addressing health disparities in marginalized communities. But none of this would have happened if Green had focused solely on the visible metric of representation. The breakthrough came from addressing the invisible dynamics of power distribution. I find myself wondering how many other areas of our lives follow this same pattern. How many times have we celebrated symbolic victories while overlooking substantive ones? How often have we achieved the visible goal while leaving the invisible architecture unchanged? This isn't just philosophical musing, it has practical implications for how we approach change, both personal and systemic. If the unseen builds the seen, then transformation must begin with what's beneath the surface, with our beliefs, our narratives, our internal permission structures, the quiet conversations we have with ourselves when no one is listening. I'm reminded of something Elaina mentioned about the Pink Parachute Diaries podcast itself. It serves as an ongoing case study in creating safe spaces where nuanced stories are shared, where minutiae are honored as meaningful threads in larger tapestries of success. Guests often arrive having navigated isolation within their fields, their micro struggles overlooked amid headline achievements. The show illuminates these subtle moments, the quiet resilience behind breakthroughs, and equips listeners with language for naming their own hidden strengths. This matters profoundly because we cannot change what we cannot name. We cannot address invisible barriers if we lack the vocabulary to identify them. I think about the talented Black women who receive pink slips while underperforming men get golden parachutes. The visible injustice is obvious. But what about the invisible toll? The self doubt that creeps in despite knowing the system is flawed. The extra energy expended navigating spaces not designed with you in mind. The mental calculations before speaking up in meetings. These invisible costs rarely make it into our discussions about workplace equity, yet they shape outcomes as powerfully as any policy. This is why Elena's insights feel so revolutionary. She's inviting us to expand our field of vision, to look not just at what's happening, but at what's happening beneath what's happening. And once we start looking, we can't stop seeing it everywhere. We see it in how certain voices are amplified while others are muted, not through explicit silencing, but through subtle cues about whose ideas merit serious consideration. We see it in how confidence is interpreted differently depending on who displays it, as leadership in some, as aggression in others. We see it in who gets the benefit of the doubt when mistakes happen, in who gets second chances, in whose potential is nurtured versus whose performance is scrutinized. All invisible, all immensely consequential. So, what do we do with this awareness? How do we apply the principle that the unseen builds the seen? First, we must become archaeologists of our own beliefs. We must excavate the narratives we've internalized about what's possible, what we deserve, what's appropriate to ask for. We must question their origins and their usefulness. As Maya Angelou wisely observed, you are the sum total of everything you've ever seen, heard, eaten, smelled, been told, forgot. It's all there. The question is, which parts are serving your highest purpose and which parts are limiting it? Second, we must create spaces where invisible experiences can be named and validated. The Pink Parachute Diaries does this beautifully by honoring the nuanced realities of Black women's professional journeys. not just the highlight reel, but the full complex truth. Third, we must shift our metrics for progress. Representation matters, but influence matters more. Inclusion is necessary but insufficient without actual power to shape decisions and culture. And finally, we must practice what I call dual awareness, the ability to work within systems while simultaneously reimagining them, to navigate the world as it is while creating the world as it should be. This isn't easy work. It requires sustained attention to what's beneath the surface. It demands that we question not just external barriers, but internal ones. It asks us to notice the water we're swimming in. But if Elena's insights teach us anything, it's that this invisible work is where the most profound transformation begins. I'm reminded of a powerful affirmation shared during my conversation with Elaina. I am building foundations others cannot see for achievements the world cannot ignore. This is the essence of what we're discussing. The most significant work often happens outside the spotlight. The most important changes begin in space no one applauds. The most revolutionary acts might look from the outside like nothing's happening at all. But here's the truth that should shake us to our core. We've been measuring success all wrong. We've been celebrating the visible while neglecting the invisible. And in doing so, we've missed the actual architecture of transformation. Today, I challenge you to become an architect of the invisible, to recognize that the most powerful changes begin in spaces no one can see, to honor the unseen work in yourself and in others. That makes visible success possible. Ask yourself, what invisible beliefs are shaping my visible outcomes? What narratives am I reinforcing that limit rather than liberate? What foundations am I building that others cannot yet see? This isn't just about personal growth, it's about collective liberation. Because when we transform the invisible architecture of our lives, we don't just change what's possible for ourselves, we change what's possible for everyone around us. The revolution begins beneath the surface. The transformation starts with what no one else can see. The most profound change happens in the spaces between the spotlight moments. So let's commit to this invisible work. Let's honor the foundations as much as the skyscrapers. Let's celebrate the climb as much as the summit. Because when we finally acknowledge that the unseen builds the seen, we don't just change outcomes, we change what's possible.